Welcome to the admin study room. We are diving headfirst into a topic that is, let's be honest, the absolute core of the MD-102 exam: configuration profiles. This is all about how we can manage settings and enforce policies across our entire device fleet at scale. Get this right and you can manage thousands of devices just as easily as you manage one. So let's get right into it.
Now, before we kick things off, we need to cover the important legal stuff. This is an independent, unofficial MD-102 study presentation based on Microsoft's public Learn content and run by AI hosts. It is not affiliated with, authorized, sponsored, or approved by Microsoft. Always verify important details against the latest Microsoft documentation.
So let's frame the problem we're trying to solve here. Manually setting up a handful of devices, that's no big deal. Anyone can do that. But what happens when your company grows and suddenly you're responsible for hundreds or even 10,000 devices? You can't just walk around to every single desk. How do you make sure every single device has the right Wi-Fi settings, the correct security policies, the right app restrictions? Well, that is the exact problem that configuration profiles were built to solve. All right, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the most important thing, the MD-102 profile mindset. Then we'll get hands-on and look at your profile creation toolkit. After that, we'll tackle a really key concept, targeting with groups versus filters. Then we'll see how all this applies in a cross-platform world. We'll cover what to do after you deploy, and then we'll wrap up with a quick look at Windows user profiles just to round everything out. Okay, first things first, and this is probably the single most important takeaway. If you go into the exam thinking this is all about Windows device management, you're going to have a bad time. The world of an endpoint admin has gotten so much bigger, and believe me, the MD-102 exam fully expects you to reflect that reality. The exam really expects you to be fluent across all these platforms. We're talking about pushing a Wi-Fi profile to an iPhone, restricting the camera on an Android tablet, locking down a corporate MacBook, and even managing settings for shared virtual desktops in AVD. Thinking beyond just Windows isn't just a good idea, it is absolutely non-negotiable. So now that we're in that cross-platform mindset, how do we actually build these profiles? Well, the good news is Intune gives you a fantastic toolkit. And the real skill here is knowing which tool to pull out of the toolbox for which specific job. Let's take a look at our options. But before we open that toolbox, let's just make sure we've got the definition locked down. A device configuration profile is really simple at its core. It's just a bundle of settings. You create this bundle one time in the cloud, things like requiring a PIN or setting up a VPN, and then you assign it out to all of your devices. It's really the bedrock of modern, scalable endpoint management. Okay, this slide right here, this is your decision-making cheat sheet. Think of it like this. The built-in templates are like your preset wrenches for all the common jobs: Wi-Fi, VPN, you name it. The settings catalog, though, that's like a massive searchable socket set with a tool for almost any setting imaginable. ADMX import is for when you want to bring over those familiar settings you know and love from the group policy world. And custom profiles using OMA URI, that's the super specialized tool you only break out when absolutely nothing else will work. So the key here is to have a mental workflow, a kind of order of operations. Whenever a new request comes in, you always start with the easiest path. Is there a built-in template for this? No? Okay, your next stop every single time should be the settings catalog. It's just so comprehensive. Now, if you're trying to mirror a GPO, that's your cue to look at ADMX import. And only, and I mean only, after you've tried those three should you even think about messing with a custom OMI URI profile. Okay, let's move on to our next section. And folks, this is a big one. Creating the profile is only half the battle. You have to assign it correctly. And understanding the really subtle but incredibly powerful difference between groups and filters is a concept that exam scenarios absolutely love to test. Here's the clearest way I know how to explain it. A group answers the big question: who gets this policy? It's your broad audience, like all corporate laptops. A filter, on the other hand, comes after and answers a more specific question. Of all those corporate laptops, which specific ones should actually get this? The best analogy is mailing a letter. The group is the city and state you're sending it to. The filter is the specific street address and apartment number. It refines the delivery with surgical precision. And here's a huge hint. This is a classic exam scenario right here. When you're reading a question and it sounds something like, okay, the policy is assigned to a group, but that group is too broad, and creating a whole new group seems like a pain, your brain should immediately light up and think, filter. That's the tool for precisely targeting a policy to a subset of a much larger group. Okay, time to bring it all together. We've got the cross-platform mindset, we know our toolkit, and we understand the difference between groups and filters. So now, let's see how this actually plays out on the different operating systems we have to manage day to day. When it comes to Android, the very first question you have to ask is, who owns this device? Is it personal or is it corporate? Because your entire strategy, everything you can and can't do, hinges on that answer. The policies you can apply to a personally owned phone with a work profile are totally different from the deep control you have over a fully managed corporate-owned device. Your strategy has to start with ownership. Now, for Apple devices, the magic word you need to know is supervised. A supervised device, which is usually corporate-owned and enrolled in a specific way, unlocks a whole new level of management capabilities. So if you see an exam question that describes a really strict policy on an iPhone, like blocking the App Store completely, it's indirectly testing whether you know that's only possible on a supervised device. And hey, let's not forget about those multi-session environments like Azure Virtual Desktop. A simple setting that's totally harmless on a single-user laptop could cause huge performance problems when you have dozens of users all sharing the same virtual machine. This just means your configuration profiles for these devices have to be way more precise and targeted much more carefully.
So, you did it. You built the perfect profile, you assigned it with precision, job done, right? Well, not quite. Now comes what we call day 2 operations, making sure the policy actually landed and is doing what you wanted it to do. This is all about the follow-through.
The monitoring views inside the Intune portal are going to become your best friend. You'll see statuses just like these. Success is obviously what we're aiming for. Error is your signal to go investigate a specific device to see what went wrong. And don't ignore not applicable. That's actually useful. It tells you the policy was received but didn't apply, maybe because you accidentally sent a Windows-only policy to an iPhone. Okay, here's a classic scenario, both in the real world and on the exam. A user calls you up and says, hey, I still don't have that new setting you pushed out an hour ago. What's your very first move? Before you start digging through logs, remember that devices check in on a schedule. Your first step should almost always be to just force a device sync. Either you do it from the portal or you walk the user through doing it on their end. It solves the problem more often than you think. All right, we're on to our final section. We're going to briefly touch on the more traditional idea of Windows user profiles. Now, this is important background info, but I want to be really clear about how you should prioritize this for your MD-102 studies. This quote from the study guide really says it all. You should absolutely understand what a local profile or a rowing profile is, but please do not spend hours and hours memorizing every little detail at the expense of mastering the cross-platform Intune configuration profile skills we just covered. That's where the exam's focus really is. So in today's cloud-first world, when we talk about syncing a user's settings between devices, we are talking about enterprise state roaming. It's a lightweight, modern, cloud-based solution that just syncs the key OS and app settings. It's a world away from those old-school roaming profiles, which were on-prem and tried to sync the entire user folder, which, as many of us remember, often led to super slow logons and massive profile bloat. For the exam, if the scenario is cloud-based, enterprise state roaming is the tech you should be thinking of. Okay, let's wrap this all up with the key takeaways. Number 1, think cross-platform, not just Windows. 2, master that toolkit workflow. Templates, then settings catalog, then ADMX. 3, know the difference. Groups are for who gets it, filters are for which specific subset gets it. 4, remember that platform specifics, like ownership on Android or supervision on iOS, dictate everything. And finally, remember that modern configuration profiles are the core skill you need, while traditional user profiles are just supporting context. And I'll leave you with one final thought to really apply what we've talked about today. Take a look at your own work environment. Where are the gaps in your configurations right now? Would the massive searchable power of the settings catalog help you more? Or would importing ADMX templates to replicate those old GPOs solve more of your current problems? Really thinking that through will help make all of these concepts stick. Thanks for joining this study session.